Principles of perceptual organization. The principles of perceptual organization, the works done by Gestalt, a psychologist. So it is known as the Gestalt theory or Gestalt law on perception. The works of Gestalt psychologists have suggested that human beings have an inborn tendency to organize sensory information into meaningful patterns which are developed for the thorough experience. So he developed three main principles involved in perceptual organization. And we can see the principles. The first theory is the figure and ground relationship theory, or the first principle is the figure and ground relationship. According to this principle, human beings have a tendency to perceive object against a background, that is to say that we seldom see object in isolation. This is an important quality of perceptual process which involves distinguishing figures from the background. In this picture, you can see that white cross against black background. White cross referred to as figure with several characteristics that distinguish it from the background. It is seen as a single unit with clearly defined boundaries so that it stands out. That's why it is projecting from the background. In contrast, the ground is less defined. It seems to behind the figure and it appears continuous with no definite boundaries. So, the figure and ground relationship principle is, according to this principle, human beings have the tendency to perceive object against the background. Okay, so that is the principle. Against the background, we are perceiving the object. That's why we are perceiving as a white cross under black background. So that is the first principle, the figure and ground relationship. Next principle is contours in perception. A contour is the boundary between a figure and its ground or background. When the boundaries between figure and ground are not clearly defined, the viewer's perception fluctuates between the two. Because of this phenomenon known as figure-ground reversal. Okay, the contours in perception that leads to figure-ground reversal. Some pictures can be seen in two different ways depending on which part is perceived as a figure and which as a ground. And in this figure, you can see the face of two people, and in other perception, you can see a white vase. So, this is an example for figure-ground reversal. So, contours in perception means a contour is the boundary between figure and its ground. When the boundaries between figure and ground are not clearly defined, the viewer's perception fluctuates between two. And based on the figure-ground reversal, some pictures can be perceived as a figure and another one is a ground. Okay, so in this picture, some may perceive that the figure is face, and some may perceive that vase is the figure. Okay, so that is figure ground reversal. Based on the condor, the perception will be vary, and we are perceiving as a figure, and which based on the ground what we are perceiving. Face vase picture is a good example for the condors in perception. Next one, principles of grouping. So in grouping in perception, we perceive things because we have the ability to group or organize things in our environment. Some major principles of perceptual grouping according to Gestalt are, first one, law of proximity. Law of proximity means, according to this law, we have a tendency to group objects close to one another. For example, most people will perceive the 9 lines as 4 pairs and an extra line at the right because of the relative proximity or nearness of the pairs of lines. So in this picture you can see that there are 9 lines and they will perceive 4 pairs of line and 1 extra line. So that is known as the law of proximity. Here we have a tendency to group objects. Next one, law of similarity. This law states that there is a tendency to see the similarity of objects in group. In this figure, most people perceive the second figure horizontally up down as lines of dashes and dot, not vertically left to right as columns of alternating dashes and dot. So in this picture, mostly perceive second figure horizontally up and down as lines of dashes and dots, not vertically left to right as a columns of alternating dashes and dots. So you just imagine that law of similarity means here we are having a tendency to the similarity of the objects. That's all. Next one, principles of closure. Principle of closure states that we have a tendency to fill the missing parts of a figure. Here in the third figure, we tend to see a circle rather than a series of dashes successively marked in a circle. So here we are perceiving as a circle instead of a series of dashes successively marked in a circle. Next one, law of continuity. Items that continue a pattern or direction tend to be grouped together as a part of the pattern. Here in the figure, we see that a curved line and a straight line. However, we do not see a straight line with a small semicircles on either side of the line, above and below it. So, in this picture, in law of continuity, what we are perceiving is, we are perceiving as a continuous curved line instead of semicircles on either side of a line, above and below. Next one, law of symmetry. According to this law of symmetry, we have a tendency to organize stimuli into symmetrical figures. We are much more likely to perceive this as a row of 4 figures rather than a row of 8 figures. So, in law of symmetry, we have a tendency to organize stimuli into a symmetrical figures. So this is principles of perceptual organization or principles of perception. So here mainly three principles: the figure and ground relationship, contours in perception, and grouping in perception. And grouping in perception again divided into law of proximity, law of similarity, law of closure, law of continuity, law of symmetry. Thank you.